Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we've got Linda with us as normal, as well as Matthew Counihan, and I'll be handing over to them shortly to take us through today's webinar on self-awareness. Just before we start, just to let you know that we will be conducting some quick polls again today. I encourage you to have your smartphones ready with the QR reader capability turned on. This will allow you to scan in the QR code and complete the quick poll on your smartphone. Alternatively, you can click on the URL link that I'll make available in the Q&A chat area, and that'll allow you to click through and complete the QR code on your PC. So with no further ado, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to everybody again, and over to you, Linda.
Hi everybody, it's really nice to be here again. I'm becoming familiar with this process by now. So I'm Linda Hammond, the CEO and founder of Talk to Us, and we launched the new normal webinars, really just to have a look at what we've been doing for the longest time and how do we think it's going to change post COVID-19. And I think one thing we're guaranteed of, it is going to change. There's no doubt about it. I think everything's going to change. And we can either hide from it, what fear stands for, forget everything and run, or face everything and survive. And so we're actually doing the second one, and we're looking at it from a humanistic point of view. How are we going to be looking at our what everybody terms human capital post COVID-19? So in light of that, today I have Matthew Counihan with me, who's a renowned actor and a producer, and I'll let him introduce himself and give you a bit of background about him. Over to you, Matt.
Well, for starters, thanks for having me. I'm glad that we could color coordinate in our studio here. I'm Matthew Counihan. Just a brief kind of introduction to myself. I come from a psychology background, studied psych, and went off and performed for years, as one does when they walk away with a psychology degree. Traveled the world with many shows and gained some amazing experience on local and international stages. Brought that back into the space of education, worked as a drama educator for many years at some of Johannesburg's top private institutions. And the world of entertainment called me back, and I am producing for Showtime management now. And Linda and I have maintained a bond through this process. We both hold theatre dear and near to us, and that's how we've kind of come together.
Absolutely. So let's just build on that for a second. Matt and I met running a festival. We were doing the marketing side of the festival, and he was doing all the coordination of the programming and the shows, etc. It was just such a fascinating unfolding for me to watch what the theatre process goes through. And although there are so many similarities between how business conducts business, there are also numerous things that business can learn from the theatre and the way in which they put on a show. And that's really what we want to cover today. We want to cover the case for just looking at how we present our business and how we take our business to market, and maybe think of introducing some of those concepts that theatre uses, and Matt will help us go through that. Just before we get stuck into that, I just want to give you a brief overview of Talk to Us, which I do every year. So you'll probably see this when you see us on video. That's our office. I mean, every year, every week. We're a consulting agency, and people often ask us, well, what does that mean? So we do the advisory side of it, and we consult on marketing, branding, change management, and then we do the agency side, which is really around the production items. So that would be where the rubber hits the road, and that is also the executables that you need in order to take your brand to market. Surrounding all of that is the integrated marketing, which we also, integrated communications, which we do, which really is external and internal, and it's just your narrative, and how do you ensure that your narrative is consistent across all your stakeholder groupings. So a little bit more about how we go about it. And the first thing we really believe in is building brand confidence in and through your people. And that's one of the reasons we really want Matt here today, because I think if anybody understands getting people to be confident, as you can imagine, being confident on stage is not easy, Matt's your man. So we believe in building confidence in your brand through your people. We do that in sort of 3 different steps that we follow. The first one is an internal practice whereby we brand the organization. What does it look like? What is its purpose? How does it want to be perceived? So it's all about not what you do, but more about who you are. And we call that Gear Up, and it's around strategy enable. And then we look at the marketing side of it, which is really how do you take this to market? How do you create the experience? And through creating that experience, you'll get emotional connection. If there's no emotional connection, you won't get many followers and people won't have any brand loyalty and they'll just move on. And then the sort of bridge between the two is your own self-awareness of your organization, because organizations can be self-aware. They can also have a personality, and that's what we want to create through your people. But how do you take your people on this journey so that they all buy into it as well? And so you would have seen a lot of our branding is about heroes, and it's because if you follow the hero's journey, it's a well-known process. It's actually quite interesting because you go through a very distinctive change of heart and of mind before you come out the other side, and you are a different person. So it's always worth going to go and have a look at the hero's journey. And then how do you continuously reflect of what you've done, what's working, what's not doing, and how do you improve? And as I mentioned earlier, sitting around that is just how you take all of this through communications to your audiences and have those conversations with them. A short introduction to our credentials, and they really are, we're 100% South African owned. We were established in 2000. We have a flagship product which is called our 4C Engaged Leadership Communication Tool, and we've had about 1,500 delegates go through that, the gamification and the normal one. We have about 150 clients, and you can go and have a look on our website if you want to see a number of who those are, and there's some great referrals on there as well. We've launched about 320 change management programs, from values to new strategies to software that's been implemented. So we're very familiar around change management, and we've had 151 thereabouts internal communication strategies that we've developed to large and small organizations. And then we are also the exclusive net presenter reseller in South Africa. It is a product which comes from the Netherlands, and it is an online tool for communicating with all your internal audiences via a cell phone, via big screens, via PCs. Very useful tool, especially in the times that we're in now. And then the last bit is just the agency side of our business, and this is where the rubber hits the road. So these are all the execution items that you would see. So it would manifest itself creating a confident brand. It manifests itself in having good social media and being able to produce an exhibition and a conference that looks good. Being able to have people who can speak publicly when they need to, and Matt and I have done quite a bit of that, helping people put on a show. Digital marketing, what is the narrative and the content, etc. So I'm going to ask you to do a poll with us, and really it's does your place of work value individuality? And maybe Matt can just expand a little bit on that for us.
Well, I mean, we're asking the question knowing or predicting what a couple of the answers are going to be, right? But I mean, the idea of the individual, there is no whole without the individual.
Yes.
So, you know, the whole is always made up of the sum of its parts. And we are putting it to you today as organizations that we need to take care of our individuals. And more importantly, individuals need to take responsibility for themselves in this process. So at an organizational level, to perhaps acknowledge the importance of the individual, and the individual to kind of go, I'm going to take responsibility in uncovering who I am and owning who I am within the context and the scope of my organization. So, yeah.
Sure. So if you just want to give us some background from your organization, is do they value you as an individual? In other words, are you allowed to be slightly different, and do they talk about individuals, or do they talk about HR and sales, and they don't really speak to the individuals within it? So we'll give you a few minutes just to fill that in. Also, try not to approach it from the perspective of, do you wish your place of work? Yes. Would value you. Go to where it is as now. Exactly. Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's important. And the reason it's important is because now if you're an individual and you're all by yourself working at home, you must be feeling very lonely if you are not seen as an individual and you are seen as a group and referred to as a group. So that is one of the reasons we want that. So we'll give you, we've been chatting through it, so I'm sure that maybe by now you might well have answered that. It was quite an easy question to answer, but you might have had a bit of hassles with getting your QR code side up and running. So we'll just give you 2 more seconds or so, and then we'll move on.
Absolutely.
I often look at those slides with emoticons and I think, what did we do before we had emoticons?
Right.
Yeah, I know. They are just so useful. I use them all the time, and when my children started to use them, I thought, what whacked out idea is that?
And we're seeing all these messages that come through these days, and they could just be a string of emoticons, and somehow you can decode them.
You'll decipher them. Yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, so let's move on. As you're aware, if you've attended one of our previous webinars, we sort of contextualize the subject that we're going to talk to in the first short while, and then we give you 4 focal areas which we think you should really focus on to try and understand the given situation. So the 4 focal areas that we're wanting to cover today, I'm going to take you through now. But before we're going to go through that, I just want to talk about, human capital, your most valued asset, human resources, and that,
I'm just looking at those and I'm kind of going, but these are our people, right?
Yes.
So it's our talent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Matt was looking at that and saying to me, so what is that? Is that what we refer to in theatre as talent? So I said, yeah.
It's just, it strikes me as bizarre. Human capital is something you park in a garage. Capital, an asset, it depreciates, it loses value. It might appreciate,
Yeah.
But I kind of just go, it's such it has no personality, it has no life, it has no soul.
Yeah, it's a very mechanistic approach to it. So we were looking at it and we were saying, how do you show that, how do we change that, and what would it be? So we were coming up with ideas like human potential, people power.
Yeah.
You came up with a nice one.
What was it? The potentials.
Yes, the potentials. We like that one. People ingenuity. Just some thoughts to think about, because unfortunately.
I just wanted to say, sorry to interrupt you there, but something that interesting that you've been very strong about it at Talk to Us is the lexicon, the language, the body of language we use to call things and to name things gives them power or strips them of power.
Yes.
And it's just so interesting. There's a nominal determination that's almost assigned to an asset or to capital that doesn't have life and personality.
It dehumanizes it.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so as well. And we also refer to those things as not the serious things. We say, oh, these are the soft stuff, and it's pink and fluffy. And I think if anything, I really do hope that people have realized that that is what drives your business. The people in your business are what drives your business. Without that, if you go to your office during lockdown, and even in some accounts now, it's a big building with expensive equipment and fancy furniture. The people are what drives your business. So I think it's time that we look at human capital.
The potentials.
The potentials. We'll call them the potentials differently. And I think the other thing is that they were saying, we can't measure what we put into it, and how do we measure it? And they're trying to value it with rands and cents, and I don't really think that makes a lot of sense. They say it's a bit like herding cats. Who can herd cats? Well, no. I want to put it to you that there is a way that you can do it. There is a model to get everybody pulling in the same direction, and this is a new way of thinking. And this is what we're going to be discussing today, is what is that model? And I think that's really important. So the 4 key focal points that we're going to be speaking about at Lens today are generalization versus individualism, awareness of self, and that's similar to self-awareness, but slightly different, and we'll cover that shortly. And then values alignment. How do you align your personal values to the organization that you're with, and why should you? What is the point behind that? And then a disciplined approach to stay in your own swim lane. We spoke a bit about that last week, but I think that's really important. Otherwise, everybody just crosses over into each other's lanes and gets stuck in those funny orange things that float in the pool. And if you get this right, hopefully you'll get a standing ovation, which is something that we've been always on about, because that's what we're trying to do. So I'm going to sort of start a bit, and Matt will chip in, because that's just the way in which we work, and it's great. But if you look at any organization, the core of an organization and its reason for being is to have satisfied customers and get a great following so that they can build the business. That's what every organization wants to do. And theatre wants to do the same.
Absolutely.
They want to get bums on seats, and then they want to get a standing ovation and for the show to do well so they can lengthen the run or that they can take it to another place. So there's a lot of similarities there. And if you have a look, there's sort of, I'm going to go through these stages that a business does. Is you brand yourself, you go internally, you say, what is my purpose? Why does that mean anything? How do I want people to portray me? What is it that I'm taking to market that is so excited? That's the branding side. Once you've worked that out and you've put the narrative together, you say, well then, now I'm going to go and attack the market. Where's my market? Where do I find them? How do I reach them? How do I package my product? And you go and you take it to market. And then you might or you might not align your people. There are often instances where I've walked into an organization, I said, I've seen an advert for this and this and this product, and the people behind the counter look at you as though to say, okay, well, that's cool, but we don't know about it. And then there's the go-to-market, which is really putting it into the market. And if you get this right, you'll get customers. And you'll get some happy customers, and you might get some unhappy customers, but we're hoping that we're going to get happy customers all around and you'll make some money. Now, the model I spoke to earlier is a model of theatre, and I think there's a lot of similarity, and that's when I said, when Matt and I were together running the festival, I just found this so interesting because there's a step missing in our model and something missing that we can do differently in business, and it's something that's a takeaway from theatre. So Matt, over to you.
Yeah, so moving on to the next one. We've got very similar processes, but I think we explore these processes in different ways, and we might emphasize a particular step in a kind of a heavier way. So your first step in business was branding, right? Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of research. What does an audience want? What are they prepared to sit through? There's a lot of research into price points. What might work in Johannesburg might not necessarily work in Cape Town.
Sure.
In fact, we've taken shows to Cape Town before that have been an absolute success. We kind of plan the shows 18 to 24 months in advance. We think, okay, this is a similar themed show. It's going to go well in Cape Town. Ironically, we end up with a completely different result. So I think there's a degree of guesswork, but the point is we spend a lot of time kind of really investigating the market. Sure. And understanding what they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think in some instances, business doesn't do that. They've got a great product, and now they're going to make people want their product. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think theatre does it slightly differently.
Sure.
They say, what do the people want? How do I actually package it so that I'll get the right turnaround, because I've only got 8 weeks or 2 months. I don't have a lifetime to do this. So there's a difference there, and I think that's key.
Also interesting with theatre, and we shared this over a cup of tea earlier, the idea of a show that is a producer's dream is not necessarily a creative's dream.
Sure.
Okay, and as a producer, we're looking at bottom line, which is what business is ultimately looking at, right? Mm-hmm. We've got to be able to get bums on seats, and sometimes we've got to walk that fine line between being creatively sound and exciting for the cast or for the creatives, but and in some cases we kind of go, we are prepared to put something out there because we know that the bottom dollar is going to be amazing, and the creatives are just going to have to take a bit of a back seat in the process.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that business doesn't always get right. So we're heavily involved in branding for companies, and so one of the first things we ask is, who's your target audience? And then they'll tell us, and we'll take the brief and we'll design for that target audience, and we'll come back and the management team will say, but we don't like that. And we'll say, well, that's not your target audience. Your target audience is a completely different demographic, it's a completely different language, and it becomes a thing that either the business owner or the business management team like or don't like. It's not focused toward the audience. So I think there's one thing where business can learn such a lot from theatre.
Secondly, once we've kind of gone, okay, we know that our audience likes a romantic comedy, for example, we start searching and we look around the globe for the kind of production that is going to fill this particular need. So we may have ideas of shows in our mind, and occasionally I think the step 1 and step 2 might kind of converse with each other. They're not mutually exclusive, but there is the sense of, now we understand the market, what their needs are, how they respond to maybe kind of violent dramas versus family-centric dramas. Case in point, Jersey Boys in South Africa went down an absolute treat. Went down an absolute treat.
Good show.
Okay. We take it to a market like Malaysia, which is more conservative. Singapore, also more conservative and more family-based. The content doesn't necessarily translate in that particular market, you know. So you got to find the right production in line with the research that you've done.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And Matt would know about Jersey Boys because he was in it. So, then you go into casting, which is our recruitment.
So exactly. So finding the talent, or as you would say, the human capital or the assets. Now this is a process which is incredibly important for us. At the end of the day, the audience don't interact with the producers. The audience don't interact with the people that are behind the wings, standing side stage, or you know, sitting in the follow spot towers. Audience don't interact with them. They interact and they engage with the actors. Okay, and I was sharing with Linda that what's really interesting about this is that we spend a large proportion of our budget is allocated towards the casting process because we know how crucial the people are. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to say we know how crucial the individuals are. Okay, so that's we will go into that in a bit more detail just now, but also just to give you an indication, 10% of our pre-production budget is allocated towards casting. It's a massive expense, but we also understand it's crucial in getting our staging and our production right. We said the word staging there, kind of preempted there. Next, we move on to the process that you guys and people at home would understand as rehearsals, staging the piece, putting it together. And this is where individuals come together in their own capacities and they bring their own magic. And we put it into this cauldron of possibility, and we mix and we stir and we provoke and invoke and all those kind of different kind of things. And the staging process is, I think, what Linda spoke about earlier as the missing link.
Absolutely. I don't believe that business does that very well at all. You know, I think we find the product, we've got the business, we find the office, we get the people, and we're going to talk a lot more about this. But we don't really prepare them well. We don't script them, we don't prepare them, we don't let them understand how we want them to present themselves, how we want them to present the product. We just assume that their version of that presentation will be correct, or their interpretation of what we're looking for will be correct. And when it isn't, then we get uptight with them and annoyed and disappointed. And so this area, I think, is for me a crucial area where business can learn so much from creating a box office hit, so to speak, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that we're not really very good at that in business. I think we need to spend a lot more time. So you'll have seen from the previous one, there is no staging, there is no creating the experience. And if it is, it's very watered down. And why is that really important right now? Because the person that you're dealing with is probably sitting on the other side of a Zoom camera. And if he hasn't been staged or rehearsed, he's probably not going to give the full story. He doesn't have a back office full of people or another friend in the meeting sitting there, or he can't jump up and go and call the right person. And he also doesn't have all the props around him. So he doesn't have the fancy office, he doesn't have the whiteboard or whatever. He's got himself, he's relying on himself. And if he's not staged or herself, they're not staged or rehearsed, they could very easily get lost, and it might actually cause more damage than good.
The other important thing about staging, Linda, is that, you know, getting a script, it's not as simple as getting a script and performing it 2 weeks later.
No.
That script is interpreted by a cast of, call it 30 individuals come together. And trust me, if you ask 30 individuals to perform that script prior to staging, you will get 30 different interpretations. Yeah. What's important about staging that would relate to business is that it is a coordinated activity, and it is led strongly by a team that has a vision and has an outcome that has been decided upon upfront. There's a degree of malleability and flexibility, and it's about finding the vessel for these 30 cast members to hop on so that they arrive at this destination, which we call the show.
Yeah, and I think there's no debate that works or doesn't work. It does. If anybody has ever sat in the movie house and stayed long enough to watch the credits, if you look at the number of people that roll over that screen, they're from the people who look after your toothbrush, right through to the people who close your caravan door, They've all got a role to fulfill, they all play a role, and they're all also seen as individuals and important. And that is what makes a box office hit and gets that standing ovation.
And then lastly, the most obvious step is we've got a beautiful production that has been rehearsed in studio over the course of, call it 6 to 8 weeks.
Sure.
And now we need to take it to the point that it interacts with an audience. So we take it to stage, i.e. taking it to the market. We talk about curtained up, opening night. The audience is in the house and they are waiting in anticipation for the excitement of what you have been preparing for them.
And it's the same thing. You've got customers sitting there waiting to be delighted and to experience something. And as you can see, their rate of experience and enjoyment is far higher than in business. What was interesting for me when Matt and I were talking about this is 8 weeks. I don't know of one organization who takes their people through an intensive course of 8 weeks of how to present their product and present themselves and interpret what their narrative is as an organization. I think they employ you, they put you on a 2 days orientation program, and then the rest you must work out for yourself. And then if it doesn't pan out the way it should, there's a sense of disappointment by the leadership, and I think that's quite sad. So that gives you a bit of a broad brushstroke as to what our cases and what the cases that we're putting forward is. The fact that we believe that business can learn a lot from theatre productions, and more so now where you are relying on the individuals to take your business out there. So let's have a look at some of the 4 pointers that we believe are quite crucial to you achieving this. The first one is generalization versus individualism. Sorry, I clicked on, I've done this before, just give me 1 second. There we go, there's my little hand, let me click on it. Sorry. So the first thing we want to cover here in this generalization versus individualism is, in business, when we find people and we recruit them, it's quite, in my mind, superficial. In other words, we bring them in for 1 interview or 2 interviews or even 3 interviews. We have a look at a Myers-Briggs test, but it's all stuff which is superficial. It's something that we can do in our social media to create the right presentation. To create the right projection of ourselves. There's nothing which really lies lower down. Unlike theatre, I think they're scuba divers, and maybe you can explain why.
And Linda, they even spotlit there. So
I know, yay!
So I think the analysis of snorkeling versus scubaing is so beautiful, because scuba is deep diving. It is interrogative. It is also, it tests, and it confirms, or it kind of excludes the nonsense. Sure. Casting processes, like I spoke about earlier, occupy a lot of the pre-production budget in terms of spend.
Yes.
And it does this because we invest in lots of time in this particular process. So going back to when we cast shows, we're working 18 months in advance to cast a show.
Yeah, it's a long time.
So we're making sure that we've really got time to find the right people, and if we don't find, we go back to the drawing board to ensure that we do. Often, so you've heard of an audition. It's a basic audition. From a musical standpoint, I'm going to speak from that standpoint, you've kind of got a 3-pronged approach. You've got to ensure that the person can sing, act, and dance.
Yeah.
So already there's a level that you've gone to beyond the CV. We are very much a doing business. People see. We can't tell people about what we do. We've got to show them what we do. So an actor comes into an audition room, they stand in front of you, and you've got to interrogate their ability to sing, dance, and act. It is not just a given that they can hit the right notes. Can they hit the right notes but evoke something in their audience?
To create that experience.
That exactly, to create the experience. And the experience is what is important. It's not about whether the actor can hit the right notes. You can have Pavarotti come in and sing the right notes, but can Pavarotti evoke what's necessary in the context of that particular production?
No, you can't. It's got zero personality. I know that from experience. And I think the other thing that is important to me when I looked at the difference in the processes is, we employ leadership and we look at their credentials, that they were a leader in this organization, or that they have got this CV, or they've got those credentials. But really, do we know how they deal with people? And more so, do we know how they deal with your people? Because you already have got a cast. It's not like that person who comes into that business is going to go and recast the entire business. He's got a cast. And how can he adjust his style to suit your people to get the most out of them so that the customers will get the standing ovation? And I think that is a real challenge in business, and I think it's something where we can learn a lot from the theatre model.
So interesting, obviously when we cast, we generally cast from the ground up. So we go in with the assumption that there is no existing cast. However, it's often the case that we have ideas of who we want for leads in the production, the anchors.
Where did you get that from?
Okay.
Because it's so visible.
Hey?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You went to a show watching this guy 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and you knew, okay. So there's that lead. I've seen him in a previous production. In fact, I've seen him in the last 5, him or her, whoever, and they are exceptional. They must be in your production.
Sure.
So you kind of got an idea of an existing structure. The people that come in need to complement this. So what often happens is we have these callbacks. So it's not just good enough to come in and deliver the script and the dance and the song and feel moved as a director in the seats. You kind of got to go, will person X be able to complement the core that we already have in our mind? And then you start the partnering process and you start looking into dynamic and chemistry, which is exactly what you were speaking about here.
And I think business often doesn't have that. So you sort of look at the CV of somebody, but you can't see how he's performing in his current role or in a previous role. It's not as transparent as sitting in a show and watching somebody put out their talent into the audience. So on that note, let's just go to the next part, which is really where we want to talk a bit about awareness of self. And so we think there's quite a lot to talk about here anyways. So maybe, should we just kick off with that?
Yeah, we've got a little clip. I found this clip from, you may well know it, a chorus line. And I know you're kind of going, I'm a business person, why must I look at a piece of musical theatre? Indulge us for a second and we'll chat about it.
Sure.
Who am I anyway? Am I my resume? That is a picture of a person I don't know. What does he want from me? What should I try to be? So many faces all around, and here we go. I need this job. Oh God, I need this show.
Oh, I love it. I get goosebumps. I'm just going to repeat what this actor is saying. He's saying, who am I anyway? Am I my resume? That is a picture of a person I don't know. What does he want from me? What should I try to be? So many faces all around, and here I go. I need this job. I need this show. It's the story of any actor, but I think it's also the story of people. All we want is affirmation and acceptance. We just want to be granted that opportunity, right, Linda?
Absolutely. Sure.
And I think what's really important about awareness of self, and this is where Talk to Us can come in and bridge a gap, I believe, is, you know, we look at that beautiful picture of those masks, but notice how far away from the skin those masks actually sit. They are so far removed from self that I really believe that what we really need to start doing is interrogating ourselves, introspecting, looking within. I think COVID has offered us that opportunity because there's been a lot of stillness, there's been a lot of pause, and I think it's offered the brave ones the opportunity, but I think it's also scared a lot of people off.
Yeah.
And people are going to be feeling fearful and kind of, what can I do? I'm feeling out of control. Why are you feeling out of control? We'll go there, you know? And I think what's really important about the creative process, the staging process, is that the actors, through their skills and through their training over the years, have learned to strip away all these roles that they've had to play, and they return to the actor, the self.
Yes.
And this is what we are advocating, is that there is a distinct difference between actor and role.
Yes.
I'm sitting next to Linda, the actor. Linda plays the role of a mother. She plays the role of a director. She plays the role of a CE, you know, of a South African woman. There's so many roles, okay, but that's not who Linda is. It contributes, you know, and I really challenge people out there to kind of go, well, who am I?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, you know, I've seen it in the time that Matt and I have known each other, which is now from about 2015, 14, somewhere around about there. It's been interesting because Matt also teaches drama. And it's been interesting because one of the first things drama students do is to interrogate who they are. And for them to be able to strip down to who they are is difficult, because as they were growing up, you're the head girl, you're the best hockey player in the school, your mom's best little girl. They actually lose who they are. And it's very difficult for people to, especially youngsters, but I think as we grow older, we just assume a role and we don't ever get out of it. So, you know, in this time period, we've spoken to quite a few business executives, and they said to us, you know, what's been really interesting is that I'm not Mr. So-and-so, the CEO. I'm busy in the middle of a video call and my son comes and jumps on my lap. You know, like, and I just get so embarrassed. Why do you get embarrassed? It is part of who you are, you know, and I think people need to try to strip those roles away, and there's a reason for that. You know, I'll tell you a very quick narrative of, I sold my first business. So I ran a business called Linmax, and after 8 years I sold that, and I was the head of that business and the owner of it and the dealer for a company called Cispro and all the rest of that. And at the end of that, once I'd sold it, I'd lost myself, because that's who I was. I was the owner of that business. I had 55 staff, I had all those branches, but I really didn't know who I was. And it was such a difficult thing for me to come to grips with who I really am before I could take another mask, because it was like taking that mask off, throwing it away, and now I've got no face. And I think that was really difficult. And I think that skill, which is taught drama students, is something that every human being should go through. And that's why the schools are talking so heavily about this concept of students going through this process, because when you get into leadership roles, or when you get into different roles in life, different people are going to want different things from you. And do you keep on switching masks to please them, or do you know who you are and say, how can I align myself to that? And that's kind of like the next bit, but Matt's going to give a bit more about this.
Lindsay, you mentioned this, do I swap masks to please them? So here's the thing, is that we play to the people in the way that we think they want us to be.
Yes.
And what that does is it just takes us further and further and further away from ourselves. So you're losing this idea of core, of essence.
Yeah.
You know, and we're going to get to the word, the big word that I really play around with in my rehearsal processes, and that is honesty. We'll get there just now, but it is about stripping away. And in this process, what you are doing is you are making yourself incredibly vulnerable.
Yes.
You know, and we'll get to vulnerability just now in terms of our feelings thereof.
Yes, and I think that's important, you know, because by doing that you become vulnerable. And if anybody's listened to Brene Brown and her talks on vulnerability and shame, you'll realize that to have a whole life you need to be vulnerable, but you need to know how to manage that. Otherwise you can have people walk all over you. But these are skills that we are not taught. These are skills that we're not taught as children because our parents don't know about them. Some schools teach them, some don't. Some kids take up drama, some don't. But if you have a look in general, children who have taken drama at high school fare better because they understand these concepts. They've had to do a deep dive into themselves. And I think this is something that as employers, we should have a look at and say, how can we improve the performance of our people by helping them overcome a lot of these things? So let's just go into the next portion, which we find quite interesting, which is the values alignment. There's your word.
There's the honesty word. I really wanted to make a point of this. In my creative processes, I have two things that I want to, you know, aside from presenting a performance, which is the ultimate goal, obviously, you've got to bring something to an audience, to your market. The one thing that I always speak about in every decision that is made in the rehearsal room is about, are you being honest? Is there a truthful element in what you are doing? And does it evoke joy? you know. They're two very what might seem very simple things, but if every action is with honesty and joyfulness in mind,
guided by those principles.
You know?
So one of the things we were talking about here was values alignment. You know, I think people often wonder, you know, so my business has got values, and they integrity and respect and honesty and whatever, and they expect me to live those values. I, for a long time, said those are not really values. They're just words that everybody in the human race understands, and honesty is such a big thing. You know, so values are quite different, and Matt's going to go into that now. But one of the things that, you know, I've always said, and we were talking about it, I would, for instance, never be able to go and work in an abattoir. I could never do that, because that's just so the opposite direction to my value system. I just think it is wrong to kill an animal. Okay, I couldn't do that. Doesn't matter what position I held. And that's the misalignment between my personal values and the business values. But Matt, you've got a lot more for that.
Yeah, you know what? If you go through the process that we were speaking about previously, about unmasking, of returning to self, finding truth, finding core, finding essence, honesty, acting with honesty in our actions, we're going to be able to start to unpack what we value, you know, as individuals, not as Linda the mom, Linda as the director, as Linda, prior to anything that's been imposed or chosen by Linda. You know, we start to unpack that, and that there's a process that we can go through to get to those points. And our values are never going to be completely aligned.
No.
The world would be a very boring place if it was, sure. You know. But I think one of the tricky things is what happens when my set of values doesn't align with the demands of, in my case, the show. So all of a sudden, I've been asked to attend an audition for a role that requires me to be a conniving, kind of villainesque drug addict, okay? Which is so far removed from me, okay? In my mind, we sit with three options here. We either go, absolutely not, it is a write-off, enough, I can't.
It's like working for the abattoir, not going to happen.
Okay. The other thing is, I can go back to the drawing board as an individual, and I can interrogate myself, and I can say, at a particular point when I did my values exercise, when I started to uncover who I was, okay, which should have already changed by virtue of having done that in the past. Remember, who we are is ever evolving, and I think that's really important. We'll get to that. But am I prepared to go back and readdress that stuff and kind of go, am I still feeling that way? Am I comfortable with the fact that I'm playing a role and I'm not being me? So there's very much the role versus the actor, Matt, and Matt's core and essence remains intact. Am I able to side and separate? Your other option, you know, if you can't do any of those, is to speak to the piece and kind of go, okay, that is an approach that a particular director or creative in the shape of business, it could be a superior leadership, wants us to attack. Maybe leadership hasn't considered that the organization too has evolved and doesn't actually need that kind of friction kind of value.
Absolutely. And I think organizations, if you remember that very first picture I showed, I said people need to be able to have self-awareness and reflect upon where they are and what they're doing. And if a number of these staff come back to them and they say to them, look, we're not happy with this anymore, maybe they need to relook at their values. So have a look what's happening with a number of massive brands at the moment in America. On Jemima's rice, Uncle Ben's rice, how I can't remember all the names, but look how they're changing their branding, because it doesn't speak to what the people are wanting anymore. And I think often we wait for it to hit boiling point before we do something about it. We need to be self-aware a lot sooner. And you know, we were talking about a very interesting model that Disney has when they bring their people in. So if you don't like children, best you don't go work at Disney, because you are going to have to act continuously. You're going to have to deal with children and be delighted with them, even on days when you're not feeling great. And that is part of what drama students learn. You know, so Matt and I were saying, you know, there are just days when you think to yourself, oh, I can't do this. And I, as an employer, don't want to have my customers pick up on that. Because if I'm going to go to the theatre, and I know this because Matt did how many weeks of Snow White?
Oh, geez, 9 weeks.
Matt did 9 weeks of Snow White last year, and I know there were days when he just wasn't in the mood for it. But when he got there, it was he put that mask on and he performed. And I think people in business, and when we talk about individuals, they need to take ownership of that. You're there to do a job, and that job has got to be performed to the best of your ability at every single time you act and you do what you need to do. And so that is something that you're taught. And so Matt and I discussed that at length. You know, like imagine if you just drove over your dog on the way to work. How would you feel and how do you deal with that?
There's that beautiful expression, the show must go on, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We talk about leaving our stuff in the wings. So there is a magic, and I know this sounds a bit airy-fairy, but just go with me on this. There is a magic that exists between the wings, the portion that the audience don't see, and the stage. And there's almost like this dust that is put on you the minute you walk and you transition from wing to stage. Now we know that it's not a dust, but it's a mindset and it's a conditioning. We know that I am one individual that is part of a bigger team, a bigger picture, and I do not dare to let my other 27 cast members down or the other 40 people of crew members around me. There's that responsibility for starters. Furthermore, I feel really respectful of the audience, the customer in front of me. You know, the customer that's sitting in the Tuesday night audience is as important as the customer that's sitting in the Saturday night audience. Saturday nights are always a jewel. They're great for us. We feel elated. It's the weekend. People have chill and all that kind of stuff. Tuesday is that first show of the week and you're kind of going, oh, and I've got another 8 ahead of me. No, you got to know that person sitting there is the first time they're watching that show, and it's probably the last time that they will watch that show. And they deserve
money for it. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Especially if they brought their kids to the show and it's cost them a couple of $1,000. I mean, who wants to go and see Justin Bieber and he's crying the whole show through, you know? So that's the reality of the situation. And I think in some ways, and this is our next point, I think business has become soft. I think business needs to take something here and apply the same kind of disciplines, but not in an authoritarian way. They're going about it the wrong way. They need to do it in a way whereby everybody understands the role that they have to play, why they have to play it, why it's important, and how they'll let others down, so that you get the individual's personal pride and their personal commitment to something as opposed to a authoritarian push down of something. So last week we spoke very briefly about purpose and everybody sticking to their swim lane. So the leadership does one thing, the managers do another one, the staff do another. And when we go to business and we identify areas in business which are a problem, we so often find that managers and leaders are climbing all over one another. Managers are thinking leaders should be doing something different, they're not doing it right, and because they're not doing it right, they're now having to do something differently. And the staff are sitting on the outskirts thinking, guys, just make your mind up. We don't actually care and tell us what we need to do. And that's where you get that lack of commitment, because people are just so tired of the drama. You don't get that in theatre. Why don't you get that in theatre? Because boy, oh boy, if there's one thing they're good at, it's absolute sticking to their swim lanes and making sure that everybody knows what their remit is and they do it to the best of their ability. So Matt, you can give us some insights into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what you're seeing here popping up on the screen is just a very brief snapshot into some of the jobs that you might find on a typical production. These are the kind of the departments that you would find within a production. I'm not going to go into details about their particular roles because that's not important. What is important is that you can add probably another 20 categories to that list. And within those categories, so you're going to have a sound designer, you're also going to have a sound operator. So you know what I mean? So there are going to be all these subcategories. For every one actor that you see on stage, they are probably doubled, if not tripled, behind the scenes. So there are a lot of people at play to make a production come to kind of take shape. And what's really important in this process is that you will never find a stage manager walking onto stage to read the lines of an actor. It's not their job. Simple, you know. You're not going to find a sound designer kind of leaning over the desk and kind of pushing a couple of lighting cues because it's not their job and it's not their specialty. So what we do is we have an immense amount of respect for the hierarchy that exists within theatre, and we kind of go, you are the best in that at that job. I dare not try, you know.
And you hold each other accountable.
Absolutely.
Because if the lighting doesn't work well, then nobody can see the actors. So what's the point?
Absolutely.
If the actors sing and there's no music, there's no point. You know, so it is, and part of this is that staging and rehearsal. Without that, they would never be able to pull this off. So it's a combination of the discipline and the staging and rehearsal that really gives you, you know, a box office hit.
Going back to that staging and rehearsal, because it is the crucial key that we believe is the missing link, right?
Sure.
What's really important is that if there's going to be any fluidity and malleability and flexibility, it is in the staging process, i.e. in the rehearsal process, business's potential missing link. Okay, it is there where things are ironed out, where ideas are shared and exchanged, and there might be a crossing over of jobs and opinions. There comes a point where they go, but the audience can't be confused. They need to know exactly what's going on, and they need to know what they're looking at with clarity. And a line is drawn in the sand, and people go, right, from this point on, it is set, it's cast in stone, the ecosystem is established, and it must work according to its hierarchy.
Absolutely. And I think that's another thing where I say that discipline, I think to some extent has been lost in business, and we need to bring that back. So the next thing we're wanting to do now is just to have another quick poll. Okay, so if you haven't responded, try and finish it off. We'd really like to get the info on this. And then really, Matt, there we go.
I think, you know, it's as simple as once you've gone through all those processes, it's a case of curtain up, baby.
Yeah.
It's time to open the show, and hopefully that process that you've gone through, which has by no means been painless. I think that's important. Okay, absolutely. There's going to be friction, there's going to be obstruction, there are going to be obstacles. It's natural, it's going to happen. But the point is, it doesn't happen in front of the audience. Okay, the magic is maintained. The excellence, the excitement is what the audience are exposed to. It's not necessary for them to understand the rest, and they don't need to know it. They haven't paid for that. They've paid for the story of Peter Pan.
Yeah, and they want to come and have a good time and enjoy the experience for the money they've paid. And in business, it's exactly the same. I've paid for a service, I've paid for a product. I want to have a good experience. I want to enjoy working with that individual that I've worked with. I want to know where I stand if I want to bring it back and exchange it. I don't want to wonder if they're going to bring it back, or I don't want to think, oh, if I have to go to that shop and face that person again now and try and explain to them what their own job is. Those are the things that really make business good and that make theatre good. And I think there's a lot of synergies, and I think theatre has taken a lot of what business do, the best of business, but business needs to take the best of theatre. That's the case that we'd like to put forward today. And if you do that, you'll get a standing ovation.
There it is.
So, Charles, I don't know if you're ready, if you've managed to acquire the answers yet, or do you want to switch over?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I do have the results ready. I'm going to put them on the screen now and then take everybody through it.
Great.
So the first question was, does your place of work value individuality? So 75% of the respondents answered yes, and there was one no. And then on the quick poll number 2, the 3 questions we asked was, do you see vulnerability as a strength or weakness? Everybody sees it as a strength. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your online presence? Most or least reflective of your essence. The average response there was 7.67. So everyone understands that to be vitally important. And then thirdly, are you conscious of why you present yourself the way you do online? And everybody responded yes to that question.
Cool. Were there any questions?
No, there's no questions in the Q&A at this time. Thank you, Linda.
I think organizations perform well when the people in the organization understand the purpose. And I think the process of staging what you need to do, how people need to act and react, I think reinforces the purpose continuously.
Creates synchronicity, right?
Absolutely. it allows people to, if they are acting as individuals, they self-actualize. And if anybody understands Maslow's hierarchy, that is what you're aiming for in Maslow's hierarchy, is self-actualization and fulfillment. And if they're acting as individuals and not as puppets, then they will get that right. And then they should acquire followers, because for all intents and purposes, the people will enjoy what they're experiencing. The experience will be good, so you will get more followers. And if you get more followers, you will have a confident brand and great returns. So that would be what success looks like if you take some of the concepts that are used in theatre and bring them into business and adopt them into business, especially around your people. And then the last thing that we just want to talk a bit about is that, it's something that we wanted to do a while ago, Matt and myself, and never really got around to doing it. And with some time on our hands now, we are going to be launching the Talk to Us Backstage business. And what that is it's really about how do you achieve what we've just been talking about in business. So maybe Matt wants to take you through some of these concepts that we've put together.
Yeah, so you'll recognize some of the terms, business terms, but we're trying to kind of create a theatrical spin on these.
Yes.
So spotlighting, i.e. highlighting where we believe there are opportunities, gaps, missed opportunities even. Taking business into the rehearsal room. So it's that key that we've been speaking about, which is about staging. So understanding that there is always work to be done. And we need to offer ourselves the opportunity to play, to engage, to make mistakes in an environment that is safe, to allow ourselves to become vulnerable and to make ourselves strong through that process. Obviously, we can do this through the likes of personal coaching, group coaching, doing kind of a series of interactive workshops, building self-awareness. These can be practices that are done in the comfort of your own home.
Yes.
They don't have to be in fancy buildings around boardroom tables. In fact, preferably not.
Yeah.
Self-awareness starts in the morning when you wake up and you expect that little spot of sun on your face, and for some reason it's not. Why? Oh,
yeah.
Maybe my eyes are not open as wide as they usually are. We're not blaming it on the sun. I kind of like that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So, building self-awareness. And then creating a cohort of, wait for it, potentials, not human assets, not human capital. Okay, these are people. They are people with souls, with hearts, with beautiful potential, and creating an organization of these superhero potentials.
Absolutely, they are ingenious, and that's really what we're looking at, is trying to unlocking that ingenuity in people. So really, that's us more or less for the day. We just want to thank you for attending again. We want to say that our next session is dealing with negative attitudes, and we've got some really good ideas on that front. And then Charles, do you want to close us off?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you everybody for attending. We're looking forward to seeing you again on the 2nd of July, same time, 2 o'clock. And thank you, Matt, for your time today. Really appreciate it, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Thank you and goodbye. Over to you, Linda.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Manny. Thanks for your time. It was great with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Cheers.